For far too long, the effective management of the customer's experience has been considered a soft skill. But today, successful companies recognize that the customer experience is king, or from my perspective, is queen. Welcome to CX Unplugged. I'm Gabrielle Gonzalez, your host, and in this series, you will hear from me and other industry experts about how prioritizing the customer experience led to amazing outcomes. Brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. Hello, and welcome to another episode of CX Unplugged on the Multifamily Media Network. Today, we are going to really dig into some data and bring it to the doorstep. What does this data mean in our industry? And I had a chance to dig into this year's Voice of Resident report by Wide Whale. And let me tell you, some of the trends are not only eye-opening, but they're super relevant for really anyone who's trying to train a high-performing team on anything multifamily property management. So I got to sit down today with our data pros behind this report to unpack what these insights actually mean in practice, because we all know it's one thing to read a report. It's a whole other thing to kind of put that data into real life action. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to Katie Ritter and Jake Hughes, both from Wide Whale, for being here today to talk to us about this great report.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us as well. Katie, where are you right now? It looks like it's the middle of night.
It's not
behind you.
The middle of the night. This was not a design choice by me. It's a closet. It's a black sliding closet in the apartment that I'm living in Santa Monica. We just moved out west, and despite what my background looks like, it's beautiful and sunny and 9 a.m. out here. So
Katie left us in Burlington, Vermont, is now in sunny LA.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Hey,
Especially
I got to know,
West Coaster.
Quick, have you taken the Waymo yet, the driverless car?
I have, and I have a lot to say about the Waymo. What a segue. I have.
Pulls out the soapbox.
Believe it or not, Gabby, this will come back in this episode, my experience with Waymo. I actually like it. So I've had a couple experiences with it. The first time was weird. You get in and this is just bizarre. But eventually after 20 seconds, it was great. And it really does drive nicely. It's great. And the one part that I don't love about it is I was in Arizona and I took it to the airport, but I think I was in one, or I think some don't go over 45 miles per hour. So the route I took was like 20 minutes longer through back roads to the airport than an Uber would have been on the highway. So that's my only word of caution to anyone that's looking to dip their toes into Waymo. But so far, I've had good experiences. It's been great. Have you ridden in one?
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess we could go off on a tangent on Waymo, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, right?
Right.
I just want to tell you guys, let me open up by just mentioning to you guys that when I got the report, I was like so excited. I couldn't put it down. I was flipping through it. I was taking notes and writing things like, oh, this is great, or what do we think this means? And then I flip the page and there's the answer. And there's like a quote from you, Katie, like, well, here's what it means. And this is why this is so important for us to know. And I was like, we're vibing on that. And you are bringing such great insights to the multifamily industry. And I'm sure, I don't know, has it come out by the time of our podcast? Has it come out like to everybody or not?
Oh yeah, it's out.
Okay.
It's available for anybody right now at widewhale.com/VOR. So a little background on this one. This is the second one that we've done. Last year was our first experience, and we're just sort of testing the waters, figuring out what it could be. I'll let Katie expand on that in a minute. But the background is this year we looked at 1 million Google reviews from about 32,000 communities across a 2-year lifespan. So 2023 into 2024. For the first time, we're able to see how aspects of resident experience change over time and have changed from year to year. And I think that's kind of where so many good little nuggets of insight have come from.
Yeah. And I think we've really tried to, when we first put the report out last year, it was a lot of data, it was a lot of numbers, and we were really trying to figure out how to explain it and measure the customer experience, where this new form of measurement in percent of mentions was the unit we were using. So we were trying to find ways to explain that. And I think this year, with the year over year trends and being in the industry for a little bit longer and talking to our customers, getting feedback on the report, knowing what's going on in the industry, we've been able to your point, Gabby, put a little bit of a different lens on it and say, well, what does this mean on site? How do you execute this, and what can you look out for? And that was really important to us. Is, well, okay, let's just answer the question, like, what does a good tour look like, or what does a good move-in look like? That's what drives a bad move-in experience, and just really try to simplify to answer those questions that we know are coming up every day for operators. So that was important to us to really have some answers to that this year versus just the numbers coming out in the report.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys have nailed it. For sure. And I can tell you from an operator perspective, for many, many years, being an operator and a trainer and so forth, it was really interesting. One of the things that stood out to me about the report, generally speaking, was that, some of the data, I don't know if that it's necessarily, some of it, I don't know if it's necessarily new, but it's substantiates, right? It's a way to substantiate sort of long suspected, I don't know how to say this, long suspected like awareness
It's like
of
instinct.
That. Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Of what's been going on. So this data helps to substantiate things that we kind of have instinctually known or suspected about our customers and about what it is that they really want and need and are really looking for. And this data really helps to show us that, and in an actionable way. So it gives it gives those folks maybe who aren't even in the executive level, right? Those mid-level company trainers and on-site folks, it gives them the data to say, hey, look, this is where we need to be focusing. You can see it plain as day in this data that these are the things that are impacting our effectiveness overall.
When we started this whole concept, we did have the goal of measuring resident experience. How do you measure resident experience? It's inherently ambiguous and fluid and sort of hard to really get your hands on and figure it out, because it can be somewhat subjective. But I think what you're alluding to, in my view, is someone who is at that VP level with, has been in this industry 20, 30, 40 years, instinctually understands a lot of these data points. They are not new because they've lived it and they've seen it. We've been able to put a specific number on a number of aspects of the resident life cycle, of the resident experience, and give that next level of clarity that, one, proves that these instincts actually, there's something there, they are true, or they're proving that something else is afoot. And we start to zero in on more nuance as well and smaller changes year over year, which instincts can't really capture.
We got we got a great email from, I won't say their name, an operator, and they had said, your report is exactly what you said, Gabby. This has been what we've focused on for they've been in the industry for 30 years, people and maintenance. And we know that's our secret sauce. We know that that's how we can deliver a great experience. And they were like, we're a little sad that your report is revealing all of that, but but that's like, that has been the reaction of like, this is just looking at what people are saying online. What are they saying about their living experience? And it boils it down to some really, you're not new. This isn't a new concept, but putting numbers, yeah, exactly, to what they believe matters the most, which I think is something different. Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe because I have been in the operator space so long for my career, I think maybe that's why it was so like titillating for me, because I'm like, yeah. Oh, and then, and a lot of these things I've been trying to, influence people on, but and you can influence a lot of people in that space. But some people really need to be, they don't believe it because it is more instinctual or seemingly subjective or whatever. And so this brings so much of that to light, which is so cool. But I also will say, I think that, again, the year over year comparisons that I want to dig into here are really meaty also, because I think it's also indicative of an evolving customer, right? An evolving resident who's maybe it appears to becoming more sophisticated in terms of their expectations maybe, and or their ability to articulate what their expectations are. So on one end, I'm saying we're saying it's not new necessarily to those of us who've maybe been doing it for a really long time. It's more substantiating. But I think also maybe, and this is a question, I guess, I'm really interested in finding out more about, is what about the perspective of our residents, right? Are they also figuring out more clearly what they are looking for, right? And actually able to put their finger on it. And that's kind of one of the things I was getting out of the report in general, it seemed.
I think there are three components of what you could think of as are changing. The way in which the resident is articulating their experience seems to be evolving from, it's like as this medium of the review becomes more commonplace, people are thinking about it ahead of time, putting their own spin on it, and we're seeing more granularity within the content, which we'll get to in a bit. So I think there's this three moving parts: the evolving communication style of the resident. Chris brought this up yesterday in another podcast that we were recording, the preset expectations by the community or group, such that if you're marketing something like 24-hour turnaround time on a maintenance request, then the residence becomes anchored within that time frame and that specific data point. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We market to specificity. We get feedback and graded on a curve related to that specific goal. And then the third piece is, I will come back to it. I'm blanking on what my third point was.
I was gonna say I can pick up that thought, and I have no data to support this, but I mean, I guess the specificity in language is an example of this. One other thought as you were talking, Jake, is I do feel like maybe it's as renters are evolving, new generations are coming up into renting an apartment. I do think that we're renting to generations that are so comfortable with being online and so comfortable sharing a lot of detail of their life with their peers. They're so connected with each other. They're constantly updating on their life. They're like, just think about the social media aspect of this. Like, they're so comfortable sharing all of that. And I think it's the comfortability, but I also think that I think reviews are now seen as sort of this like civic duty to report out on to have your peers' backs and say. And a lot of reviews that I'm reading now are saying like, if it's negative, it's just like for the people reading. It's like they don't necessarily need the resolution. It's like this community aspect, because this group of people have been so connected, and it's such a peer-to-peer relationship that these next generations have. So I think that has something to do with it too, and I'm seeing more of that language as well in reviews.
My third point that I remember now is technology. Evolving technology is changing, and we have, AI in the last 18 months coming into the process. Operators trying to figure out what's the perfect cocktail of this technology within the day-to-day operations of the community. How much can we use this to improve our efficiency and save costs without totally blowing up the resident experience? And so what's super useful about this data is we start to see, some leading indicators of changes within the resident experience that may be related to those circumstances. And while small, that's kind of how predictions are made, by looking at the most recent data, looking for slight tweaks and trying to extrapolate onto how this could scale and ultimately impact the resident experience long term, and operators can tweak the process from there.
So, in digging into the report a little bit, one of the things that stood out to me as one of the big takeaways was that speed, is the new standard. And it feels like, that's maybe the headline for the new resident experience, speed. What did your data reveal kind of about how fast residents are expecting responses and resolutions to things? I know you mentioned you connected a comment earlier to that 24-hour maintenance service thing, but what kind of is that data showing about what residents are expecting, even beyond maybe the maintenance piece?
Yeah. Oh, this is the what we've seen in the language shift. So in 2023, a lot of the reviews around speed were really general, like quickly, timely, promptly. The new language that we see in 2024 is 24-hour turnaround, same day, responded right away. Like it was immediate. And I think that with the introduction of AI and with these communication tools, I think that is now the expectation, is to be able to reach out and get an answer within 24 hours. Or at least some type of response within 24 hours. So we saw this shift in language around the specificity and how fast, and that's now driving the expectation. We also saw management come into the picture a little bit more here, and I think this is a really interesting one to me. Management in general increased their standing in positive reviews. They 20% increase in positive mentions of management. And I think this has to do with speed, where because perhaps now our systems are just a little bit more connected, you have data and information in one place. Anyone at the office or anyone in management can answer the phone or answer an inquiry and have the answer in front of them quickly, and not have to go check with the maintenance supervisor or check with those specific roles. I think what we're seeing is management is now become more of a facilitator and taken a front row seat into facilitating the resident experience versus just being there when something goes wrong, and taking more of an active role in creating a great experience. So those were kind of two things we saw of management being more facilitators and responding quickly, in that speed element as well.
It does appear that communication improved last year. So we saw a 2% drop in negative mentions of communication overall, and a 5% drop in negative mentions of communication during the tour phase specifically. So I think props where props is due. Management seems to be asserting itself acting as a productive middle individual within this process and doing a good job. So it seems like the expectations are being set pretty high with speed. The reviews are pretty specific, and management seems to be an effective, connective tissue. When it goes wrong, people are calling out not meeting those specific expectations as well.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, just even from an operator perspective, one of the things that or actually, I can't, years and years and years ago in my career, I got some advice that was really, really important. And I want to say this is, 20 years ago, I got this advice, which was to always respond to any, pending resident issue, whatever it is, by the end of business. So never leave a resident issue, whatever it has to do with, on your desk until tomorrow, which a lot of times people, on site are really, they're really, that would happen to them because, they're just piled up and they can't get an answer, where they haven't had time to get to that particular thing, or they don't have time to research it, or they just don't have the answer because they have to get with other people. And so rather than contact someone back with bad news or the news that there is no news, they just kind of, move away from it. And once I got that advice, I put that into practice and have trained my teams on that over the years. I think that's one thing that I think has resonated with residents, over the years with my teams, but also I feel like you're seeing in this report too, that people just want to be communicated with. They want, and they want to be, they don't want to be left hanging at all. So I was super excited to see that in there. And Katie, I think there was a quote by you that said, responsiveness is no longer prized, it's expected. Excellence is found in the follow through, which I thought just really captures that notion so well. And I think it's a great reminder for all of those on-site teams that are executing out there, is that even if you don't have the answer right now, get back to the folks and let them know that I don't have an answer right now, but I'll, follow up with you again tomorrow, or, whatever, or utilize your tech solutions to do that. But it seems pretty obvious that that's a real game changer for people.
Yeah, I think one thing that technology has done this last year, and the adoption of more AI and communication tools is getting that response out. I think in 2023, in some of the language shifts, it was like, hello, like, is anyone there? I can't get in touch with anyone. And this year it's been, customer service has gone up. We've seen an increase in positivity there. And so I think, the responsiveness piece is now becoming table stakes a little bit. Is can you get back to someone, and then I think what we're going to see, and as we go into 2025, and where people can separate themselves, is, okay, you responded and you set an expectation. Is that follow through going to happen? And that's, I think, the piece that as an industry we might need to figure out is and a lot of it's around maintenance. But can we execute and respond at the same, and follow through at the same speed that we're responding?
I think the perfect data point example of expectations, which backs up Katie's quote within the report, is, does a topic show up often in negative reviews, but not often in positive reviews? Meaning the staff gets dinged for doing it wrong, but then does not get rewarded for doing it right. So communication, as an example, is the number 4 driver of negative reviews overall in 24, mentioned in 18% of negative reviews. But it's the number 18 driver of positive reviews, mentioned in only 4% of positive reviews. So your fantastic communication is not a driver of positive reviews. It's a box that is checked, and if you do it right, you get credit, but it doesn't make it through to the narrative that the customer talks about. Whereas if it's wrong, it surfaces, it bubbles to the top.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, right? And there to be made for people too, to see that distinction. And I think it kind of goes to some of the other things the report is showing about consistency in terms of those expectations. So, here's what we say we're going to do, and then did we do it? So if you do what you say you're going to do, you're not really getting rewarded for that. But if you don't do what you say you're going to do, or whatever the implied the implied expectation has been to the resident, if you don't do that, then you're going to get dinged for it. Am I saying that? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think it's communication across teams as well, was where it gets complicated. So you have a leasing team that is establishing a certain set of expectations and a narrative that gets further complicated if there's AI involved and you have software setting certain standards. So it really is so important for the entire property to be on the same page. And maintenance staff is kind of getting the short end of the stick sometimes here. So working with them to figure out what's fair, because any expectations set by the leasing team fall through and tend to show up as problems within the move-in process. Were there issues with turnover? Does that kind of grow and bubble up within the renewal data at the end of the experience as well? So that's a tough challenge. I definitely don't have the answer to that, but getting multiple teams on the same page and being very detail-oriented about that is key.
It makes me think about like what you just said, I think kind of transcends even industries with respect to, it made me think of like when you call the credit card company or the bank or whatever, and you have to put in the automated system, they say, what's your account number or whatever. You find your card, you put it all in, you're waiting, you wait, you finally get somebody on the phone, and the first thing they ask you is the information that you already gave them. And it's like,
yeah.
Why is this not streamlined? I think I, as a customer, have actually said that to them before, and they're like, I don't do that. You know what I mean? But I think my point is, I think it transcends industries. And I think our industry, with the relatively recent adaptation of so many other technology solutions that are going into our communication cycle, it's clear that that's becoming increasingly critical for operators to focus on and make sure that we are streamlining those things.
I'll give you a good example. This happened on Saturday. Our dog was limping and reached out to, we go to it's called Modern Animal. It's like it's a vet here, and they've got a couple locations, and reached out, sent them a message through the portal, got a response right away, and it was 100% AI, but they were asking the right questions and triaging a little bit, just like basic triage, and got us in for an appointment Sunday morning at 9:30. So the next morning, we're like, peace of mind, we're going into the vet, wakes up, he's fine. He doesn't have a limp anymore. I messaged the clinic, and there's a $50 cancellation fee. And I was like, hey, we messaged in like late last night. There was you got us in really early. We're so grateful. Like, he's actually totally fine. And it was a human that responded saying, no problem, Katie, all good. I'm going to waive the fee and cancel your appointment. And I think that that is a perfect example of how to use both. And during that was just a human moment of we're not going to charge you this fee. This was a last minute thing. We get it. And glad your dog's okay. And so I think that there's sometimes with if we over automate, if I was trying to cancel with AI, they'd be charging me that $50 fee. And I'd probably be in my car bringing the dog to the vet. He's fine, but I didn't want to get charged $50. So I think that's a really good example of how to use both, and where the human element can really make an impact in that handoff for sure.
And all of these experiences grow over time. The unique challenge in multifamily is the duration of the relationship with the resident. That's fairly unique, and there's unfortunately a lot of opportunity for it to go south. And we do see in the data elements of this like compounding scar tissue over time. So if we look at
Nicely
renewal,
put. Very nicely
Jake's on
put.
fire today.
Compounding scar tissue. I love the metaphor. I love that.
when we look at renewals this year, cleanliness is the number one rising issue. And besides the material problem of keeping a clean community, when we look at it across the life cycle stages, from year over year, 2023 to 2024, within the tour life cycle stage, cleanliness only grew 0.1%. So it's basically flat. It grew 12% in move-in, 16% in maintenance, and 24% in renewal. So you see this, it's growing as it goes throughout the life cycle stages. So something that's not really considered or thought too much of early on, then happens once, twice. And by the time you're looking to sign on for the next year, it's a real problem.
That's a really interesting, that's such an interesting extrapolation from this report. And I feel like from an operator's perspective, it's like what's causing that, right? Is it our grounds? Are we not maintaining our grounds and or our amenities? I know there was some other information about, the way residents now are looking at our amenities and wanting them to be not only just there, but how they're really looking at how well are we maintaining those on a day-to-day basis. And like you said, there's a much longer life cycle in multifamily than in some other retail verticals. But, if they're visiting that fitness facility, for example, 2 to 3 times a week, there's a high likelihood that it could be not properly maintained. And how much emphasis as operators are we really putting on the consistency of those grounds and just our campus in general?
Yeah. I think the other, and this goes into cleanliness as well, and maybe a data point that helps with maybe answer some of that, but pests have gone up as well. So pest complaints up 12% in negative reviews. So I don't know, that could be a piece of it as well. I think the general maintenance of the building is a really important factor that I think, at least when I think of maintenance, I think of the unit, I think of when things are broken. But I also know that the general grounds and the building and that's been there for weeks and things like that builds up. And when it's happens multiple times, that's when we see it show up in these negative reviews. So that was a stat that certainly jumped out at us. And I don't know if it's partly because we could be moving people off site, centralizing some operations, and so we're missing maybe some cadence to make sure we're running regular checks and things like that. I think that could be a piece of it. So yeah, I think it's certainly something to pay attention to for sure, and residents are noticing.
Katie, I think you're spot on with that that conclusion right there. I think there's so much decentralization kind of going on throughout the industry that I think missing that cadence is exactly spot on. And you can see that showing up in the report. Just like bringing it right down to that resident perspective. If you think about all the things that are going on in a resident's life when they're coming and going every day, and sometimes they might project some of their frustration right onto the property. But like, if maybe somebody stuck a beer bottle or a Coke can or something in the bush that's right by their entrance, right, and it's kind of like jammed down in there, and nobody sees it for weeks, but that resident sees it every single day. And so the littlest thing that may have happened is being just compounded and by that freaking can that's still there, you know what I mean? And they're like, these guys don't pay any attention
And
to
by
this
the way,
stuff.
yeah, the can's still there.
Right. So something that's like, seemingly innocuous, right? But to them, they see it, and then that bubbles up into their perspective of how they're perceiving the value for what they're, getting there.
In the data overall, we see cleanliness up 17% year over year, negative reviews. Safety and security up 1.5. We see amenities up 1.6, utilities up 16%, facilities up 3%. So we sort of see creeping, small, but small increases in negativity in a number of these topics that relate to the public environment or the kind of the broader community environment outside of the unit.
Yeah, and it shows up in renewal too. We saw cleanliness and positive renewal reviews up 8%. So when it is done correctly and people are, because there were more complaints, I do think there is a little bit more of noticing when something is properly maintained because they've got an eye for it. And it's something that's really important.
Yeah. Which, and I think reinforces the need for operators to ensure that that is something that they are consistently addressing. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was the fees. It seemed like there was some data about fees and the communication of those fees that really kind of bubbled up as something this year that's changed. What can you unpack that a little bit for us and tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so when we look at, just want to get my data right, negative renewal reviews, so we're looking at renewals specifically. Unsurprisingly, rent is often mentioned. It's a key complaint, but it dropped 27% year over year. So we're seeing this precipitous drop of mentions of rent, but at the same time, we see the mentions of fees up 21%. So it's almost as if there's the acclimation period of the post-COVID rent hike is, starting to solidify within the mind of the renter. But any of these little extra fees that are getting stacked on top are starting to get magnified because they already feel like the base rate is pretty high. And then when you go and add all these extra details on, that's spiking within negative reviews.
So do you think that it has to do with more with the fees themselves or the communication about the fees?
I think it's the latter. I think it's the communication and surprise around fees. And I think people are, they're willing to they get that fees exist. There's trash, there's things that go on at a community that they're paying for. And I think that the communication of them is where we're missing. I was looking for apartments in LA recently, and to be a shopper was a really interesting experience. And I would go look at and sort by base rent, and then I'd go on the website and there'd be another $500, $600 tacked on. Like they would show the fees. So my base rent that I thought was not the case, but I had the information online and it was easy to see. I think that transparency, and then in some cases, it wasn't there. And when I got deeper into conversations, it would be like, whoa, so what am I actually paying each month? And so I think the communication and like explaining the why behind this is really important. And I was listening to like the Friday update. Lisa Trojine was on it, and she was talking about how like teaching and training people how to sell them is really important. And putting like explaining why there is this trash fee or why there is, pet or package or anything like that that's added on, and put it in the context of their day to day and learn how to talk about it. I do think that there is a little bit of, we've gotten a little fee happy in general, potentially as an industry. So there may be some hangover from that. But yeah, I do think that it's the communication of it for sure.
It seems to be that most of these complaints can be at least muted through communication. If anyone listening to this has a tool, it's always communication, and optimizing communication can resolve a lot of these issues, or at least is the best tool that most of us have to use. On-site teams may not have any control over the rent prices, and that's that's something they have to work with. So making value-based pitch, as Katie alluded to, communicating throughout the process, refining that, and knowing that residents are paying attention, and it shows up in the reviews when it goes wrong. So communication is the center of a lot of the report and a lot of issues that come up.
Yeah, it seems like transparency is really important, just as it relates to all of those things, starting with the move-in piece. Um, you know, I noticed there's some, information just too about people coming to move into a unit that doesn't maybe reflect what their expectations of their unit was going to be, because that's not the unit that they saw. And operators not recognizing that that's going to be a critical piece. So if you're not able to be showing your actual unit, you got to make sure that you're being very clear about the differences these new residents can expect between what they've seen so far and what they're going to see when they come for move-in. I feel like that is similar to the same thing with the fees. So your rent is X, and then there is going to be Y and Z are some fees, but then when they see that in their lease, for at move-in time, and they're surprised by that, that starts off that wound, if you will, right? Going back to that scar tissue metaphor that I really like, but that starts off that wound, right? And then they're already there, so they feel sort of like, what are they going to do now? I have to move forward with this, despite the fact that I am not pleased with maybe the way the unit looks. And I didn't realize I was going to be paying this extra, money in fees that they're telling me I should have known because it was in something, but I didn't see it, or whatever the case may be. So they move forward. So now they're already hypersensitive to anything else from a transparency or communication perspective that falls short, i.e., maybe there is a pest control need or something, and there's a fee now tied to that they didn't realize maybe it was coming, or they get a fine for, parking, or, something that they hadn't anticipated. So now these things are really compounding that, metaphorical scar tissue, right? That by the time renewal comes up, they're like, wait a second, and to them, it's all compounded.
If you want to figure out how to improve your customer experience, just go straight to your renewal reviews, because that's where you get the kind of culminative view of the entire experience, and it punctuates the details much more than you might get. You can get little process tweaks with tour or move-in, but the sort of the shape of the complaints tend to be pretty consistent. Renewal is really where you see where are my problems, where are these issues really getting exaggerated over the course of a year or two, and it can help you prioritize what to fix next.
So, Jake, what can you give us like maybe two big wow factors, or what are two of the big most interesting data points on the renewal feedback?
Great segue.
Let's leave these listeners with some really good actionable stuff. They could take this, chew on it, take it back, and really get brainstorming on how they can impact some execution for these residents.
Okay, you want to take a stab at it while I get my bearings?
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. But the cleanliness and the rise of cleanliness. So like an actionable thing is checking that cadence and checking your maintenance of the building protocols and preventative maintenance process. I think that can really go a long way, and understanding who's in charge, when are these things being checked, how are we going to do it if we're in a pod, or how does that work. So I think that's a big one that came up the most in renewal. And then I think the second piece of that is communication. I mean, I think people really just want you nailed it, transparency and to be communicated with as a resident. And what I don't see in this is perfection. I don't see people needing and looking for perfection. And so I think there's a general understanding of, I'm here for 365 days at least, and it's not going to be perfect, and I don't expect it to be perfect. And so I think the responsiveness and communication, and you said it, Gabby, too, even if you don't have the answer yet, just knowing that there's someone working on it, and there's a process in place that gets noticed more than something just being perfect and nailing it. So I think that's really important.
To jump off of Katie's point, big picture, we saw this last year and this year again. Maintenance is the number one consideration that residents are thinking about when they tend not to renew. Problems with maintenance, among the obvious, like lifestyle changes that can't really be saved necessarily. Maintenance is the number one driver of negativity. People are the number one driver of positivity. We haven't mentioned that yet. I think that needs to be said every time that we come on one of these shows. People, your on-site teams, and positive reviews, far and away the most mentioned topic. And those one-to-one experiences are always top of mind for the resident. We see management come up as a proxy for people within negative reviews because thankfully residents tend to not isolate someone by name in negative reviews just out of dignity and self-respect to not call this person out publicly. Doesn't mean that individual didn't do something wrong, but they tend to sort of management means people and vice versa. So people playing a huge role in renewal. The components of your team, friendliness, helpfulness, and professionalism, each of those is growing in mentions within positive reviews for renewals year over year. So those are growing with importance. Professionalism is up the most out of those three year over year. So those three are something to train your team on. Keep those in mind. And then again, cleanliness seems to be showing up as a derivative of maintenance that is getting called out, unfortunately. And those are the things we like to highlight because those are components of the resident experience that can be improved upon incrementally. Location, amenities, these things are definitely major considerations and major drivers of positive renewal reviews, but they move slowly or can't be influenced dramatically at all. So it's sort of very much not something that needs to be top of mind most of the time.
I love it. So in closing, I think actually, I was going to ask you guys, what's one thing people could do to start using this kind of data to train people and improve performance without a huge new platform. But I feel like you just sort of answered that question. I feel like I really want to have, I really want to have maybe a couple of follow-up guests on with some other operators out there and really dig into various aspects of this report and come up with some really good execution strategies. And I'm guessing some of our listeners out there are also thinking about, okay, how can I turn some of this into action for my team? And that's, where I can come in too and be helpful with that. I've been doing it for a long time. I love this data. I've got it right here in my fingertips. So if anyone wants to connect with me, please DM me on that as well, because I love helping teams and translating insights into action. So Jake and Katie, Thank you so much for joining me today on CX Unplugged. And thank you so much for this great data from Wide Whale. I am absolutely certain that people are going to be able to extrapolate some great ideas out of this and really improve their operation. So thanks for putting this stuff together. It's really, really fun, exciting, and insightful.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. And again, you can get the report, wideville.com/VOR. Go follow Katie Ritter on LinkedIn for some hot takes. And I think that's great. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this episode of CX Unplugged on the Multifamily Media Network. Join us next time for probably more deep dives into this really great data. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next time.
CX Unplugged, where we have redefined who your customer really is. Join me next time to hear more missteps and masterful manifestations in the world of multifamily customer experience. Brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network.